Hello and welcome to the video. This is about a new quadcopter from an outfit called Rekon FPV. It's called Rekon FPV, but actually the clue is in the battery strap. This appears to be a division of HGL-RC. Now, I've looked at some of the other HGL-RC quadcopters on the channel, and I'm a fan of the HGL-RC stuff. And for those of you that have been watching the channel for a little while, you'll also know that personally I'm a big fan of the Explorer style quads. For me, going out and going into the middle of nowhere, just flying around and kind of following water courses and treetops and things like that are what I get a big kick out of. So anything that flies for longer than a couple of minutes, I'm really interested in. And this is the brand new Rekon 5 FPV. It's a 5-inch quad, two versions available. This is the 4S version, but there's also the 6S version. But if I just briefly go back to the camera, the big difference is just how it is put together. This thing is a work of art. I'll talk about how it flies. I'll do the standard stuff. I'll unbox it in a second. I'll go through some of this stuff, show you the Betaflight setup. Again, I'll do a dump and diff, link back down below. The propellers attached using a slightly different method, and I'll talk about what it's like to fly. But this is just beautiful. It's almost too pretty to fly. It's the kind of thing that you'd expect to see on Peter Parker's desk that he's tinkering with. I almost expect it to have like a red spider printed on the bottom. It is just absolutely beautifully put together and flies epically. And the way the frame is done is really unusual and really striking. So while I unbox this, let's go through some of the specs and talk about what this is. This is a modified version of the original Dave C. FPV mini long range design. It's been tweaked to carry a little bit more weight. Available in both 4S and 6S. I've got the 4S version here, which has the 3000 kV props. Flight time is posted at about 25 minutes, and this is a 5-inch quad, so it's unusual to see an Explorer set up like this with 5 inches. It's a lightweight frame with 10mm aluminium bolt construction, show you that in a second. Shock absorbing TPU mount at the front, foldable Immortal T antenna at the back for crossfire, which is great. It's a mild dead cat design, making sure that the props are as far away from the camera as possible, which is cool. GPS at the back, along with a very tall antenna to make sure that you always get a really nice reception for your image. So inside here is a F722 mini flight controller, 30 amp BL32 3.6S 4-in-1 ESC. This one's got the Cadix Nebula Pro Vista kit in it. Again, these motors are the 3000 kV motors. If you went for the 6S version, there'd be 1800 kV motors. GPS at the back. The Gem fan props are in the box. I'll show you those in a second. Those are 5125 props and comes with the usual kind of battery straps and all that stuff. Now, the flying lead at the top isn't needed. That's for if you want an auxiliary receiver. I'm going to control it with the DJI controller. So underneath that beautiful model is the props. We get 2 sets, which is very nice. A GoPro camera adapter. It says in the listing that that is included, so I wouldn't guarantee that's going to be in the shipping versions. And then at the bottom, we have the battery straps, the other pieces in here of how it all goes together and how you set everything up. You have a couple of braces. Now, these are braces that go along the outside of the arms to increase strength and protect them. I do love the way that this thing is laid out. These the whole arm's been held on with those 2 big bolts. It just looks absolutely stunning, and you can see the lost model finder underneath there, which is handy too. And the last thing you've got is a set of screws for different things. Now, you are going to need some of those screws to attach the props. As you probably spotted, it's slightly non-standard prop fittings, probably what you're used to. To pop them on, make sure you get the shorter screws that just clear the props, and those go into the top of the motor. When you're fitting the props, do be careful. The Betaflight setup and the way this drone is set up is it is the reverse direction for props. So while we're on the subject of Betaflight, let's connect and have a look. So the first thing I notice is there's something in the data flash log. I will clear that out when I've done this, but that is really good to see. That means that this was armed from the factory. I do love people like HGLRC that make sure that the stuff that they're shipping to you hasn't just been slapped together, stuck in a box and popped in the post. So let me go through each of these. Ports look like this. So we have serial receiver is set for UART1, UART4 is set for MSP, which will be, so we've got ESC telemetry, the GPS is set up. Yeah, all pretty standard stuff in here, lots of ports. Configuration is set to this. The only thing, again, is the motor direction is reversed, so be super careful of that when you're attaching a prop. D-Shot 600 is set. Board and center alignment is like that. It is set for bi-directional D-Shot, although we're not going to be used like that. Gyro and PID loop frequency is 8K, but because we're on an F7 flight controller, the CPU is just ticking along. GPS is turned on for navigation and telemetry. This is all of the settings by default. OSD, dynamic filter, and all that stuff is turned on. Power and battery look like this. Failsafe is set by default to return to home, or GPS rescue, I guess. We're in Betaflight, aren't we? PID tuning looks like this. Don't worry, there's a link to the dump and diff files for this model in the description below if you want to have a full look. Receiver settings, pretty standard stuff. Modes are standard if you're not using the DJI FPV controller, which I am, so I'm going to have to come in here and tweak a couple of things, but it's nice to see the arming set up. Air mode is kind of only set for the flippy floppy mode. On-screen display looks like this. I'm going to move a lot of this around so it's kind of laid out how I'd like it. CLI, if I just do version, we're a nice modern version of Betaflight, and again, while I'm in here, I'll do the dump and the diff. So with all that said, let's go to the field and fly. To fly it, it flies as well as it looks. Not surprising from someone like HGLRC. Silky smooth, even with the DJI controller, with the amount of expo and the tune that's on it, everything in Betaflight is set up for really buttery smooth flying. This is the FPV footage from my DJI goggles. I haven't stabilized it or anything. This is exactly how it was flying out the box. I haven't tweaked a thing. Do be aware though that I am flying quite gently here, and I have got the camera down at a reasonably low angle. It is quite adjustable from quite a hefty rake, which will give you a lot more speed and get the props out of the image. But if you put it down like this, then unfortunately you will get a little bit of prop. Now there's plenty of power here. This is hovering well under a third throttle and pootling around, doing at about 30 odd miles an hour, just kind of hugging the treetops. Now with a 1500 4S pack, I'm getting about 9.5 minutes of flight time. So if I put a 3000 milliamp hour lithium ion battery on this, I'd be getting around about 20 minutes. Now it talks about 25 minutes on the website. My experience of flying it here, I'd be really pushing it to get to that, and maybe that's just the way that I'm flying it. But the other thing that you can't really tell from the video is that it is a little bit quieter than you would expect. This is a 5-inch quad, but compared to some of the other 5-inch quads that I've got, this is nice and quiet, and that's probably due to the props that are on here and the way that they're spinning. It just handles it really, really nicely. The only issue is when you descend into your own prop wash, you do get a little bit of shake in the camera, but the rest of the time it's just absolutely beautiful. And the GPS is fantastic at the back as well, because of course if you're flying in an unfamiliar place, you always know not only the direction but the distance to home too. So in summary, what do I think? Well, I think you've probably already got the hang of this. This gets a big thumbs up from me. This is probably one of the most striking quads that I've seen in a very long time. Lots of quads that I've had in here have been very pretty and very functional. This is the first one that feels like a little bit of a work of art. So congratulations to HGLRC, well I guess it's called Rekon FPV now, for bringing this out and doing such a beautiful job of putting it together. The way the soldering done and the quality of the components and how it's built is absolutely beautiful. I couldn't find fault with any of that. And I'm excited to see what else the Rekon FPV brand does. Be interesting to see if they did bring out a 7-inch prop version of this that would maybe give even longer flight times, slow the motors down a little bit, increase the prop size, give the same amount of thrust for even less juice. Nice touches on here, which seems to be a lot of the ones from these guys, with obviously having the GPS at the back. This little beeper is fantastic. Do make sure that you remember to press the little button to cancel it. As soon as you unplug the battery, I think it's like a 30-second timer that starts running, and once that is out, then the beeper will start beeping. So remember to press that button, otherwise you stick it in the bag, you start walking back to the flight line and it's kind of beeping and screaming away in the backpack. But this is really loud. It's one of the kind of Finder style beepers. And I love that as well, in case you do accidentally clip a treetop or something when you're out there exploring, and give you a chance to find the thing. Cute options as well for lots of different receiver types. As you can see, I took the extra little cable off mine because I'm using it with the FPV controller from DJI. I didn't need to worry about that. Again, be wary if you are using the DJI FPV controller. The mode setting will need tweaking a little bit. By default, it's kind of set for a more traditional radio setup, but on the website you can order it with whatever receiver you want. And I love the idea that they've even thought about how to vertically mount a crossfire antenna. See my video on antenna alignment, why that is a really good idea. A couple of things to be aware of, but they're notes rather than criticisms really. First of all is, of course, be aware that the props are using these slightly less common fittings and that they're spinning in the opposite direction. So don't do what I did and start putting them on and then realise that they're reversed in Betaflight. You will have to activate your air unit. It wasn't activated out the box. Remember, to activate it, you are going to have to plug it in. So I'd recommend doing all that gubbins before you install the props. Do that as your very last job. The battery space on the top for the action camera isn't huge. So any support that you need for the action camera is kind of going to have to push out a little bit just to give you enough clearance to get the battery in behind. Watch out for the huge antenna. This does unplug a little bit. There is enough loose in the cable, so I find that when it goes in the bag, I kind of unplug it, and then when I get to the field, I just kind of push it in, and that means that it is a little bit easier to transport with this wacky great antenna stuck out the back, but it does mean you get lovely reception. And then the last thing to talk about then is the price. This isn't cheap, but then you're not going to expect something like this to be particularly cheap. This kind of air unit is going to be £110, £120 of the price just on its own before you add all the rest of the stuff. But if you are looking for something that's going to fly amazingly well and look this fantastic, that's been put together as well as this, then this for me gets a 5-pill rating. This is just beautiful. Like I said, it is almost too pretty to fly, but because it flies so well, there's no chance of that happening. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.